Start.
We have to wait. How?
Okay. So, welcome everybody. So, welcome to our talk. Okay, the slides are not yet in. Let's wait just a few seconds. Because we have an awesome first slide with some draws from Uros. And I don't...
Yeah.
Okay. So, welcome everyone, welcome to our talk, a developer, a designer, and a data scientist walking to a bar. So, who are we? So, I'm Luca, I'm a developer, I'm a software architect in the Swisscom Data and AI team. I'm from Switzerland, and I almost have 10 years of experience in this field, and I'm in this team for almost about 2 years now.
And my name is Uros. I'm UX designer and product designer in our team. 10 years of experience as well. And I come from Serbia.
And I'm Maxime. I'm a data scientist. I've been in this team for 2 years now in Swisscom. I am French, and yeah, so we were talking about this team about data and AI. So we're within Swisscom. It's a fairly new team. We have developers, DevOps, data scientists, designers, testers, product managers. We're very multicultural, as you can see on this map, with more than over 15 nationalities and many languages as well. And we're spread across Switzerland. We have 3 offices, one in Lausanne, one in Bern, one in Zurich. All of this makes us say that we are probably the most diverse team within Swisscom. We haven't verified this, but we're pretty sure of it. And if you were here this morning at the keynote talk, you know how important this is for building awesome software.
Yeah, also another stuff that it's pretty rare in IT is that our 2 managers are ladies. So this is really uncommon in IT usually. And I'm really interested in this topic. That's why I pick up this topic, this talk with these 2 guys. And so actually is after working together for more than 1 year, we discovered some patterns that we try to analyze and refine for a better collaboration in our team. And
so yes, the topic would be the magic recipe of how to build products, but unfortunately we cannot provide you one. Instead, we can provide quite few tips.
But yeah, so these tips really rely on your team and actually how you want to collaborate in your team. So first of all, let's start with a management tip. I really like these quotes, and also our bosses love it, so that's why it's in our slide. So tell the crew where to go and let them figure it out. So this is really our spirit. So the bosses just say which is our goal, and they trust the team and let us figure it out.
So how it works in reality. First important thing is keep team members as close as possible in the same room whenever possible. And now it relates to the graph you saw previously. In our case, we are spread over 3 offices. It's crucially important that we meet occasionally. For this purpose, twice a week, we all go to Bern from other offices, and then we sit together and discuss. Of course, we try to solve more simple issues over Skype, online, but whenever there is a smallest doubt that one of us in the team doesn't figure out or does not align with the rest, we sit and talk in person. It's crucially important. Although this is era of remote work and online work, online meetings should be always a plan B, because if you have multicultural and multi-diverse team, it's sometimes hard to understand each other and motives and drivers behind any of decisions, even when you sit together in the same room. So yeah, let's do it in person whenever you can.
Another tip that we want to provide to you, which is very important in our eyes, and we will bring this back along this talk, which is that you need to include everyone in each discussion at every step of a product building. So at least one developer, one data scientist, and one designer, in order to avoid bad things that will prevent the product from being good and useful for the user in the end. So now we're going to start by breaking things down and trying to do battle 1 versus 1. So we start with the differences, or like the small mistakes that we need to do between developers and that we need to avoid between developer and data scientist. Here we're going to talk about theory versus pragmatism. So like we think there is a bit of both in these two roles. So usually the data scientists, they're very good at imagining like fancy models or like state-of-the-art research that works perfectly in an ideal world, but unfortunately we're not in an ideal world. And so that's why theory. And on the other hand, they're very pragmatic usually when it comes to actually coding, like to actually code the end result. So the coding standards are much lower than the ones of developers. So like the idea is just to move fast when it's about coding. So in this case, it's more pragmatic.
Yeah, and by more practical, we mean, so for example, the project can be like some Python script glued together with some Bash script also and some kind of stuff. So for developers, so we are very pragmatic, and usually they teach us to structure everything and, you know, very well formatted and perfect and clean code and so on. But you have to actually figure it out and find a trade-off between you and data scientist. So actually, first tip for data scientists, so stay down to earth when you're designing your solution and don't overthinking. Also, try to imagine that your solution, or maybe your script that you try for extracting some data or so on, that they can be reproducible and maintainable also for the project, also for other projects and so on.
My turn as a data scientist to give some tips for developers. Like also try to stay down to earth when you imagine the solution. I mean, we all try to work agile, so it's also what we want to do when we build something. Don't over-engineer the architecture of the solution. You don't need like abstraction layers everywhere when you start at the beginning. So like you might have like higher coding standards that we do, but sometimes a bit too much. So like you will see that you can live even if the code is not as perfect as you would want it to be.
Okay, so talking about code quality, so it's really important here, like I said before, to find the trade-off between the two roles, so between developers and data scientists. So we as developer, we can sit together and discuss with data scientists. They can learn a bit from us, but also the opposite. So, and talking about coding standard, I mean, some tests sometimes maybe
yeah,
you know,
it's useless.
So because otherwise some stuff can happen, like this one, the day before they go live. Yep.
But then we can also discuss about relationship between developer and designer and why it is complicated. So this section we can call trendy colors and wow effect. Because like designers, as most people think, are good at proposing great functionalities for the end users that are totally out of reach, not doable, or out of the budget.
Yeah, and developers usually have to do the dirty job and put together the application with that design, you know. So, okay, we are good at making things work and achieving goals for minimal effort and cost reduction, of course, but we need to also to find a trade-off with designers also, because maybe they design something completely unpractical or it's too difficult to develop. So first tip for designers, so you're designing experience for the end user and not for your portfolio. So also keep in mind that stuff. And your job is not done when you submit the design. So there is also a feedback phase with developers, and you can submit a first draft, and then you can discuss with the developers if it's doable, yes, no, and so on. So also here is always talk and share your perspective and say why you would like to design that stuff like this instead of that.
And then for note for developers is that simple to use for you is not the simple to use to our customers. which means, yes, designers can overdo things at times, be super creative, but at the same time unrealistic. But still, it's important to interact and discuss what were the motives behind some designs. So then, even if my design is not doable, let's sit and talk how we can bring similar experience to our customers, instead just proclaiming, hey, we cannot do this, we don't have time, I will do it my way, and then user is not happy with that. Yeah. So here is one real life example of one recent project, right? We had, as always, really small port of time to deliver this, and it was a widget for a customer project application, and there I built like experience as I wanted it. I did a bit testing around the office, and then I came with proposal on the left to Luca, you know, saying like, hey, can you build this please? Thinking I put one gradient, one icon and round corners and it's fine. But then Luca told me...
Yeah, right. No, I mean, you can imagine, I mean, we usually don't develop a desktop application, but this is a widget and should run on Windows, on Linux, on macOS. It's round and there is a gradient in it. The gradient rotate and also change color, because these three colors are the mood of the conversation, because behind there is also a system that is listening to the audio call from a phone call and so on. So,
stop now, you're scaring all the front-end developers.
No, but it's true. I mean, when he continued complaining, I said, okay, I'll build something with sharp edges, you know, and actually like... half day later, we both were quite happy with proposal that was in the middle and think, okay, problem solved. And then all of a sudden there was a customer, hey, my new visual identity came from the agency and this is our logo, it's circular. So yes, I would prefer if this widget can be round. So the conclusion behind this slide is, yes, although we managed to align, we're not the only stakeholders. And even if you hope for the best and have understanding from your teammate, it doesn't mean that it will reflect to the product to the end. So yes, at the end we made this round shape, whatever rotating thing actually work, and we're all happy, right?
Yeah, and now let's move on to the last battle, data scientist versus designer. We're going to title this, which is a weird title, but we're going to title this, but I can offer you this instead. It's about discussion between both and what one can learn from the other. So in the sense that data scientists are very good at dealing with data, that's what we do, that's our job, and we know what is doable with the data, but we sometimes lack the creativity to know what we could do that is actually useful for the customer, for the end user, because we can think about plenty of things to do that are pretty useless. And this is why it's a discussion between both of us. Well, like, can you do this? No, but I can offer you this instead.
Yes, and for designers, same thing, right? Designers are good at proposing great functionality for the end users that are totally out of reach, not doable, or out of the budget, meaning that if we work separately on solving the problem, we won't get far and we won't impress our customers. Therefore, there is a tip that as a designer I can give to data scientists. You might be passionate about data, but if you overdo it, user will be bored or overwhelmed. Be selective and display only data that user really needs and not all the data you can extract, right? And in order to do that properly, ask a designer for help, support, comment, whatever, right?
Yeah, and my tip for designers, like, you need to collaborate and communicate with data scientists. I mean, you want to know what you can do with the data, and this you will not know by yourself, so you need to talk to each other. It's only after communicating between each other that you can really shape your ideas and think about a solution that is both doable and great for the end users, with features that will be useful for him.
Yes, and in case of Swisscom Internal Search, which was the project where three of us collaborated together, we had a project owner from completely different department of Swisscom, and we had, like, I don't know, budget of 5 days to complete POC, meaning that Maxime started earlier before rest of us, and he put out some sort of layout where he displayed all the data that he could find and extract, which was quite interesting for him. But when I saw it, I was like, whoa, I mean, how can I prioritize information from this slide? And of course, I did like some really fine tuning and kicking out all the information that didn't make sense to me. And then when proposing my design, it turned out that those information had sense to everybody else except for me. So the end result was putting back some of those things that I thought were not needed, but also removing some from the first proposal. Sitting together, we found the perfect measurement and conclusion, but it was important to learn about each other's perspectives while delivering solution.
So, last tips for developer. As you can see, or like we said here, the key point really is communicating with each other. I know every one of you love Jira and Slack and all this kind of tool because they're practical. We communicate asynchronously. We don't have to talk in face by face. But yeah, so force yourself to speak sometimes, and really you have to find trade-off with data scientists and with designers. So a useful skill that you should have is be able to communicate with the other members of the team.
Last tip for data scientists as well. Like already said it, but don't just build them all. I mean, it's a great excuse to just go do something else while it's training. But
like Giphy on Slack.
Yeah, yeah, go on. Now. So yeah, I mean, you know the data. You have to have a very central role in shaping the product in the end. So you need to communicate between the two other roles, and not just build them all. Also, after the all is built, you should also make sure that it runs smoothly in production. So it's not just building them all.
And for designers, producing visuals is just a small part of being a product designer. Supporting other roles in your team, such as product owners, developers, data scientists, is as equally as important, right? So you have to focus on that one as well. Introduce design thinking to whole team and steer overall design process, which is not just on your screen, but also in workflow of whole team.
So, in the end, what happened when we all meet together? So we have nothing to say about this one, but just awesomeness. Okay.
Yeah. More seriously, we said at the beginning that we cannot provide like a magic recipe, but we can still we have given you some tips, but we will still share how we do it, and then you need to find out whether it works for your team in your work environment and to adapt it. So when we have a new like project, product, whatever, always come like we want to solve a problem, and we have to discuss the problem to really understand it. So this is these are discussions with the customer, the product manager, you name it, and the three of us. Afterwards, there's always a part like that involves only the data scientists about data exploration. I mean, this part is mandatory in order to know what is doable out of the data, because even if you think about great functionality that might be ideal for solving the problem, if the data is not clean enough, or if you don't find the information in data, it's not going to work. So you notice these two are in different color, because afterwards we start a cycle, so we iterate over like building the product. So once we really know the problem and based on the data what we can do, we define the features we want to develop. So this involves mainly the three of us, possibly also customer and product managers, but really the idea is that we three like define what we want to build.
And yes, at this point I started doing first wireframes and designs, and I heard the word feasible and what is available so many times that I immediately quit with some crazy ideas, but already start focusing my designs on something that we can actually produce under the circumstances, available data, available budget, and so on. At the same time, Maxime is doing model training, or data scientist role, right?
Magic. Black
magic, yes. Magic happens side by side, so we save some time and cut some corners. And of course, then when all this is done, I hand over my work to Luca, to developer, but this is not where my work in this phase 5 of implementation ends. Instead,
yeah, because when we start implementation, so we start with just a few demo or just a few draft with the initial design, and then we start iterating over it. So in the first week of a project, we really redefine together all the features and so on and what we want to display.
And then we proceed with feedback, internal feedback, before we test it, because some errors would be obvious and we want to make them work before we approach with the testing. And therefore we do it through next level of implementation.
And then there is an implementation phase 2 when we also continue or we iterate another time on this phase with designer and developers, and we continue refining after our usability testing or so on, and sometimes we also remove features and so on, not only adding feature.
Yes, so at the end, that's it. We end on this phase, start from phase 3 again, and this is like circular in this blue area. And more or less that's it from us
So,
today.
Thank you, everybody.
Yes.
Some questions?
Do we have time?
Yep.
Yeah, you should give your microphone.
Can we land the microphone maybe?
If it's a question for developer, you'll have to yell.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah. I can
So just one question, because you've got 3 distinct roles. How do you have a safe word? And what I mean by that is when you start doing the other person's role, do you have some way to communicate that? So if the developer starts doing the data scientist role and the data scientist role starts doing the designer role, how do you start? How do you say stop? No, that's my role. Stay in your lane.
I would say that role is just title in your CV or position. But what we discuss internally a lot is that when you face the problem, you have to be realistic about what are your personal capabilities, and you just stand up and say, "Hey, I'm going to cover that area." Regardlessly, what is my official role.
But in the end, usually there's not much overlap between the designer and the 2 other roles. It's a bit distinct. But like when we do work together, obviously, if I train them all, I can also start like making it run somewhere. And then at some point, it's when the code is too ugly for him, I hand it over to him, and
it's always too ugly for me.
Yeah, and we are fixing the bugs and so on. So usually, yeah. So there is no real line between us in the end.
But usually we work always on projects that are a bit similar, so it's pretty obvious for us how we share the work. But of course it can happen. I don't think it ever happened really that we had to fight over something.
Okay.
Thank you.